Welcome back to Market Headlines. The Organizations for Economic Cooperations and Development raises its projections for Indonesia's economic growth in 2021 to 4.9%. It is believed that the rise of the global trade will boost Indonesia's export and consumption.
The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, raises its projection for Indonesia's economic growth in 2021 from 4% to 4.9%. It is believed that the rise of global trade will boost Indonesia's exports and consumption. OECD Secretary General Angel Gurria explained that the economic recovery due to the COVID-19 pandemic shock would occur gradually. Economic recovery also depends on support for households and corporations. There are still many households and sectors that are vulnerable to the pandemic. Angel also recommended that Indonesia take advantage of this momentum to advance major reforms, from strengthening the tax base, liberalizing markets, fighting corruption, and overcoming regional disparities. Meanwhile, responding to OECD projections, Minister of Finance Sri Mulyani revealed that the Indonesian government has taken many policies as an effort to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. One of them can be seen from the widening of the budget deficit from the previous 1.7% of GDP to 6% of GDP in 2020. From IDX Channel team, reported.
As we know that the COVID-19 pandemic has been going on since the beginning of 2020 and is still ongoing today. However, 2021 is believed to be the year of economic recovery for both global and Indonesian economies. So various signals have marked the recovery, including the projections issued by a number of global institutions, one of which is OECD, which has released the estimates of the economic growth in the number of countries and Indonesia. So how positive is the OECD's projections for this year? So let's see the data in the next graphic. Through the first graphic, we can see the forecast from OECD about G20 member countries and global. First of all, we can see United States that is projected to have 6.5% economic growth in 2021. And then moving on to India, whereas it is projected to have 12.6% recovery in 2021, and then moving on to Germany and France. Let's begin from Germany by 3% economic growth in 2021, and France for 5.9% economic growth in 2021. And when we talk about global growth, here it is. OECD has raised its 2021 global growth forecast to 5.6%, which is 1.4% higher than it is estimated in December 2020. So OECD sees that activity has been picked up in many sectors of the economy, and rollout of the vaccines, while still uneven, is gaining momentum. The huge fiscal stimulus in the U.S., meanwhile, is likely to provide major boost for the economy. The OECD estimates that the U.S. stimulus package is going to add 1 percentage point to global growth. But vaccines have to be deployed faster to achieve the global economic recovery, as the performance across the country is still uneven. The pandemic is increasing social inequalities. Lockdown measures are particularly affecting vulnerable groups and also risk long-term damage to the job prospects and living standards for many people. And then the OECD estimates that the world output is expected to reach pre-pandemic levels by mid-2021. But the pace and durations of the recovery will depend on the race between vaccines and emerging variants of the virus. So how about the projections of Indonesia's economic growth in 2021? So let's go to the next graphic. Here it is. Through the next graphic, we can see many global institutions has projected Indonesia's economic growth in 2021. First of all, we can start from OECD by providing 4.9% economic growth for Indonesia in 2021. And moving on to the International Monetary Fund that is projected Indonesia to have 4.8% economic growth in 2021. And then moving on to the World Bank, it's kind of pessimistic by providing 4.4% of economic growth in 2021 for Indonesia, and moving on to Asian Development Bank by providing 4.5% economic projections for Indonesia in 2021. And the OECD Secretary General Angel Gurriera said that the Indonesian economy would continue to show recovery in the coming years, with the projections of economic growth reaching 5.4% in 2022. Gurriera said that the recovery process would take place gradually. However, it will depend on the recovery process in the health sector, which is currently still shoulder the uncertainty. He added that although there was pressure on income, which had an impact on consumption, and the trading conditions that had begun to move had also helped the recovery process in Indonesia. And likewise, Bank of Indonesia believes that the improvement in domestic economy will continue, driven by the global economy, vaccinations, and strengthened policy synergies. And the accelerations of vaccinations carried out by the government, as well as public discipline and health protocol, will support national economic recovery. So the central bank predicts economic growth in 2021 will be in the range of 4.3 to 5.3%. And not only projecting economic growth figures, the OECD also provides suggestions for Indonesia to be able to take advantage for the momentum of economic recovery. So let's see at the next graphic. Here it is, we can see some advices from OECD in optimizing growth momentum. Here it is. First of all, optimize the job creation flow to strengthen the business environment. And the second one is that OECD suggests Indonesia to strengthen efforts to address environmental problems and issues. And the third one is that investing in competencies and skills and reforming the labor market to create better jobs. And yes, responding to OECD advices, Minister of Finance Sri Mulyani explained that the government had taken many policies as an effort to deal with the pandemic. The impact of these policies can be seen from the widening of budget deficit from 1.7% to 6% in 2020. She considers that the deficit is relatively lower when compared to OECD's countries, but she ensures that the government is committed to gradually returning the state budget deficit to a level below 3%. On the other hand, the minister is committed to increase the tax ratio and carrying out fiscal consolidations as the pandemic subsides. And as a year that is believed to be a momentum for recovery, what are the strategies implemented by the government this year? And what are the strategies? So let's move on to the next graphic. Here it is, we can see the strategies and also challenges in Indonesia's economic recovery momentum in 2021. Starting from the strategies, we can see that the accelerations of the national vaccination program, of course. And the second one is that continuing the enforcement of restrictions on micro-scale community activities. And the third strategy is that accelerating the realizations of government spending in handling COVID-19 pandemic. While in the other hand, we can see the challenges. Of course, we have numbers of challenges. First challenge I mentioned is about the escalations of the COVID-19 cases. And the second challenge is that widening this fiscal deficit. And the third one is that the global debt risk. And yes, in the midst of the global economic recovery, there are several risks, and one of which is the risk of the global debt that I mentioned before. No exceptions. Government debt has been piling up. Bank Permata chief economist Joshua Pardede said that the risk of increasing global debt triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic has pushed down the state revenues. And at the same time, state spending tends to increase in an effort to limit the negative impact of the pandemic, with a large amount of fiscal stimulus programs, of course. And even though there's a risk of increasing debt developed and developing countries, Joshua assessed that Indonesia's economic fundamentals are still good. And yes, viewers, even though various strategies have been implemented, but without the involvement of all stakeholders, the targets of the policies will be relatively difficult to achieve. And therefore, synergy is an important thing that must be done by all of us. And stay tuned to Market Headlines because we will be right back after this quick break.